Biz Buzz on Marlow FM 97.5.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Biz Buzz program. This is Dermot Fitzpatrick with you for the next 90 minutes. There are certain times of the year that seem to be more stressful than others. You notice that? The run up to Christmas, perhaps, getting everything ready for the summer holidays. And then, of course, there's that very, very stressful time that we all find where many people, they have to put their tax returns in. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it does seem to bring on the stress factors. However, this afternoon we won't be talking about tax returns for big corporations or even the owners of small businesses, solopreneurs or the self-employed. Now, what we're going to be talking about this afternoon is about the 30 million employees who pay tax, and according to my guest this afternoon, they might be paying a lot more tax than they really need to. His name is Wisdom Da Costa. He's a qualified accountant, a corporate treasurer with 20 years experience in the field and is an expert in helping people to get their tax returns. He's a fellow of the Chartered Association of Certified Accountants, an associate member of the Association of Corporate Treasurers, and if that wasn't enough, in addition, he's qualified as a teacher. His name is Wisdom Da Costa. Good afternoon.
Hello, Dermot.
Wisdom.
Hello, listeners.
And thank you very much for joining me in the studio.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Why is it that people find it so stressful, do you think, filling in their tax returns?
Possibly a couple of reasons. One is financial pressures and also the mystique and the mystery surrounding tax returns and the whole tax legislation. It's a bit of, gobbledygook sometimes for some people, and they just glaze over. And perhaps some people criticise me for this, but one of the things that people really struggle with is the officious language of HMRC. They don't always come across as helpful. I'm sure they want to be helpful, but they don't come across as helpful, and their letters can make you feel a little bit scared.
Yeah, so when you get a letter from HMRC, you can see it on the envelope. Do I owe them? What is it they want?
Yeah,
it's never kind of, I bet there's a refund in this for me.
Very rarely, but I'm going to hopefully show you how you can get that refund.
Yeah, so I hadn't mentioned in the introduction, but you have written a book, How to Get a Tax Refund and Pay Less Tax in Future, an employee's guide to tax allowance hidden in plain view. I love that, hidden in plain view.
A very snappy title. Hidden in plain view was the insistence of my wife. She said, we've got to tell people that this stuff is available, and this is a great expression because they don't get told about this. Yeah,
when I was talking to some people about this, I was going to interview you about the book, they said, oh, it's probably a fraud, be careful. There's always a tendency when people are talking about tax, or it's always tax evasion rather than how can I find out enough about the tax rules and regulations so that I can actually not pay a penny more than I actually need to.
Yeah, this is actually one of the struggles I have with the book and presenting it, is that people actually don't believe that the system is wrong. They think it's right, but it's not. It's not right for two reasons. One is that the system is designed to collect tax as much as possible from employers as simply as possible. And the other side of it is that people don't tell you, HMRC perhaps a little bit to blame here, that what you can claim. So there are lots of things you can claim, which are not talked about.
So that's what we're going to be looking at this afternoon. So it's not about, let's be clear, it's not about tax evasion. It's actually increasing our understanding of the rules of the game.
Absolutely. If you don't know the rules of the game, you can't play it properly. And then you can be bullied and get worried about by officious letters.
Well, just recap, because I gave a little bit about your background. So you've been an accountant for almost 30 years. You've been in that field for 30 years. Just give us a little bit of background, what's got you to here.
Right. I started at university, did a degree in biochemistry, moved on from there to join Deloitte & Touche. So I actually did that in Belfast, a firm called Goldblatt & Co., still going strong over there. Thereafter, came back to England, went through the process of qualifying, joined a large Franco-Belgian company called CETA. You're probably aware of them. They collect bins, they operate waste transfer stations, waste-to-energy plants. Mm-hmm. Grew up through the ranks there, so went from a financial controller all the way up to group financial controller when we were a £600 million company. In fact, I think they're still based in Maidenhead. Then thereafter, I shifted over as the company became much larger and did some group treasury. So this is the Association of Corporate Treasurers.
So I mentioned that in my introduction. What exactly is a corporate treasurer?
Well, if you've got lots and lots of money and you need to find lots of money, corporate treasurers help you with that whole process. So one, they'll find ways, if you've got the money, of investing that, making sure that your company gets the maximum return from it, so it's not sitting idle. If you need money, then we'll go out and source the funding from bankers, financial institutions, and sometimes even other sources, personal wealthy individuals.
And is that an in-company placement, or is that outsourced?
Yeah, it's very much an in-company placement. It really deals with the cash. Cash is king, and it very much is a...
So cash flow and use of the company's money, making the company's money
making sure you've got the cash available to pay the bills as they fall due. Because at the end of the day, this is what actually terminates most companies' operations. It's not profitability, it's a lack of cash.
So they can have lots of bookings. The books can be full with orders, but not enough cash in the bank to pay the creditors. Yeah,
absolutely. You need to understand the business cycle for that particular company, what their sort of creditor and debtor balance is, and the net effect is that all affects cash. Are people paying late? Do you have to pay early? We need to manage all of that to make sure that the cash is there. Cash is available for major investment projects. So planning is a key role in group treasury.
And how did you then move to specialise? Do you specialise in tax?
Yes, I think I've always had.
So I just want to be clear on that. Yeah. So you're an accountant, but your speciality is focused on tax.
I run a small practice over in Windsor, so we're I suppose I'd regard as something like a general practitioner. So like your GP, like your doctor, you go and see them. First port of call. Any issues, if there are any specialist issues, you'll go and get a consultant. But generally speaking, my firm can deal with most issues that businesses and individuals can throw at them.
So let's talk about what we're here the topic this afternoon about personal tax, and this is about individuals. This be individuals who are working in a company and who pay their tax through the company normally.
Yes, this is for anybody who is regarded as an employee. So they're on the payroll, and the company deducts tax from their monthly payments or weekly payments, and then pays the net amount to them and collects tax and pays it over to HMRC. So if you're on a payroll, regarded as an employee, if you get issued a P60 or a P45 or a notice of coding, then yeah, this is for you.
So most people might think, well, the company's handling that, that I've paid my tax, I've got my money, I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Which isn't actually correct. You're right, you may have that presumption, and indeed I did as an employee myself. But when you actually look at the tax rules, PAYE in payroll is designed to collect tax simply. It can't cope with a lot of complexity in tax codings and whether or not you claim expenses. So it's designed for a very simple purpose: simply collect the tax, simply calculate the tax. What it doesn't do is it doesn't give you any credit for expenses that you may incur during whilst you're doing your job.
So that's where this conversation comes in. Then I have a responsibility to do something in order to collect the refund on expenses that I think I might be entitled to. Yeah,
broadly speaking, that's correct. If as an individual employee, you look at the list of things you can claim for and you say, yeah, I can claim for that. I've paid money out for this. And you can go back 2, 3, 4, up to 5 years, no more than 5 years. If you haven't claimed, you can go back all that period of time. So if you imagine that you're spending £100 a year, or you can claim allowances, and we'll go through what those are in a moment.
Yes, yeah.
£100 worth of allowances a year. Then if you've spent £500 over 5 years, effectively what you can do is claim that. And if you're paying tax at 20%, 20% of £500 is £100. So that's how much you've overpaid tax by.
And what I'm just hearing you saying there is that if that has happened, I could at this point in time reclaim tax that I might have been owed that I haven't claimed yet for 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a deadline coming up on the 5th of April, and you can only go back this year plus the previous 4 years, so that's almost 5 in total. But there is a deadline. You have to make the claim by the 5th of April, and each year as you go forward, the 5th year drops out.
So anybody who's listening intently could get their pencil and paper out and start taking notes as to the things that they might have incurred, expenses that they might have incurred that as a result of listening to this program, they could actually claim that back?
Yes, absolutely. The year that you're about to lose out on is 2009-10. So anything you spent during the course of your employment between the 6th of April 2009 and the 5th of April 2010, if you don't get a claim in for that year within the next couple of days, you'll miss out.
And not jumping ahead, but I presume I would have to have receipts for those expenditures or some record that I did have those expenses.
It does depend on the sort of claim you're making. For some things, I would always advise make sure you've got receipts. But if you're claiming for things like mileage, if you had to drive whilst at work or on your work duties and your employer hasn't paid you the full amount you can claim, then of course you don't really have receipts, but you do have a record. You should keep a record of the miles you've driven and when you've driven.
Okay. I'm looking forward to this. Is going to be kind of interesting, really interesting. But it's time for some music. And this time I looked in our archives and I thought that this one would be a good one to start off with. And that was, of course, The Kinks with Sunny Afternoon. And if you've just joined us, you're listening to the Biz Buzz program. This is Dermot Fitzpatrick. This afternoon with my guest, Wisdom Da Costa, and we're talking about how to get refunds in terms of personal taxation. So Wisdom, let's begin by talking about what are the key principles that we need to be aware of when we're thinking about our own personal tax as individuals. Yeah,
the key principles for me are for me to help you get a claim and make that claim successful and make it as large as possible. There are a number of rules you have to be aware of, but to simplify them, what I would say is that we talk about the general rule when employees can claim allowances, and it's a bit stricter, much stricter in fact, than if you're a sole trader or a solopreneur. So in summary, and I won't give you the whole tax jargon, but in summary, the general rule says you can get relief for costs you're obliged to pay in connection with your role. So that sets the parameters and the ideology. So the question is, what is your role? Well, you have to refer back to your job description. And here there's a little point that if your job description doesn't actually match what you are actually doing, then maybe you should get your job description changed. I know that may not be so easy. The alternative is to ask your employer, when you have to make payments, is to somehow send you an email or some sort of evidence that you have to do this, so you're obliged to make this payment or incur this cost.
So there are certain tax allowances for certain kinds of jobs. You may be doing a particular job that involves those allowances, but your job description doesn't include them. So you either have your job description changed to be in alignment with the job you're actually doing, or you get an email from your boss to say that's what's happening.
Yes, you need some sort of evidence that you have to pay this or have to
that you have to incur this cost.
Absolutely right, yes.
Okay.
So that's a sort of general principle. A few other things to help you out there, though, is that record keeping. You should keep good records, and the ideal is to keep a copy of the actual invoice or receipt. Now, the different ways of doing this, you can actually photograph them if you want to, or use some sort of the new apps and which are available, which allow you to record. I say record, I mean take a photographic copy of your actual receipt. I'm surprised that HMRC allow it, but thankfully they're bringing themselves up to the new age, machine age, and are allowing you to keep photographic copies of evidence rather than just the actual physical receipt, because many people will end up with boxes of receipts, which you don't really want. So record keeping is very important. Another key principle is the amount you can claim. Now, the key principle here is that you can only claim up to the amount you earn. Now, that may sound silly. Well, of course, you're not going to spend more than you actually earn. Well,
but you could if you were, if you had massive expenses. It is technically possible.
It is.
If you were flying around somewhere and you were incurring lots of airline costs.
It is possible, or if you have to buy a lot of equipment, for example, if you have to work from home, you've got computers, printers, a number of other networking bits of equipment. It is possible that you may start off, for example, you start in March, and you have to spend a lot of money, and that will keep you going for the next 5-10 years. So it is technically possible. So you can't claim more than you earn, but you can get around that. Although that's more complicated.
So I hear that if, for instance, if my expenditure of equipment, for instance, in a year is more than I earn, but in fact I'm going to be using that equipment over the next 4 to 5 years.
Yes.
So that would be a case in point.
It would be.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, many people, if they have to spend money during the course of their employment, their employers pay them back. Now, if their employers pay them back, then their employers will normally issue a document called a P11D that comes out at the end of a tax year, in fact, a couple of months after the tax year, usually about June or July. Now, what that will show is what expenses have been paid to that employee. What's the point of that? Well, it's this. It's anything that's on that P11D, you're going to get taxed on. So you have to make a counterclaim to make sure that you don't get taxed on something which you had to spend the money on in the first place.
Right. So the expenses that you've incurred, that you've sent into your employer and they have reimbursed you,
Yep.
that would be included on the P11D, which would actually be added to your salary, and so you would be taxed on that amount.
Pretty much so, yeah.
Yeah,
Certainly
in principle.
anything on that P11D, you'll be taxed on.
You'll be taxed on.
A copy of that document will go to HMRC, and they will tax you by changing your tax code for the next year. So they will give you a reduced tax code.
For the following year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now not everything goes on the P11D, and I won't go into that because it's complicated. But if something is on that P11D, which you've spent your own personal money on, you need to make a claim.
And so that you can anything that you've spent that isn't on the P11D, you can claim. Okay, good. So you put in a separate claim form to the tax
it's
office.
both. Anything on the P11D that you spent the money on, claim.
Yes.
And anything that's not on the P11D that you spent money on, claim that as well.
Okay, I can already see, in my own history, I can already see where I've lost out.
Okay. Well, 5 years.
5 years, okay. So, and give us another principle.
Those are the key ones.
They're the key ones, okay.
Yeah, if you've got those in your mind, you have to refer to your contract of employment or make sure that you get some sort of documentary evidence that you have to make that claim. Secondly is you can't claim more than you earn, although there are exceptions, and the book, which you mentioned at the start of the show, does say how you can get around that. And finally, make sure you've checked your P11D, because that you really could be paying too much tax.
That's a real important one. I'm sure that not many people, I'm making this up, not many people would know that.
Correct.
So that's the P11D you need to check to make sure that what's on the P11D, that it tallies with the expenses that you've incurred, and if it isn't there, then you've got to claim that back as well yourself.
Okay, I'd probably put it even more simply than that. If you see something on the P11D that you will be taxed for, and you don't think you should, make a claim.
Okay, and we're going to talk later on about a simple way of making a claim, and you've got some tips and some ideas as to how we can do that easily, with ease and grace, without too much pain.
Well, as little pain as possible, absolutely.
So give us some examples of specific costs and allowances that you can claim tax relief on.
Okay, now with the key principles, the idea is that it's what your job says you have to spend your money on, that's what you can claim. But over and above that, I've given in the book 21 categories of things you can claim for. You may actually be able to claim for more than those 21 categories, depending on what your job is and what you're required to spend money on. But some of them are assistance wages. In certain conditions, you can actually claim for employing somebody yourself.
Give us an example of that.
Right, an example of that might be...
How might I need... so if I'm an employee... how would I need the assistance of someone else to enable me to do my job? Yeah,
it's very there are a few unusual circumstances, but if you're a marker, for example, if you're a teacher or lecturer, and you get paid by results, and you have to, when I say results, I mean you get paid depending on how many scripts you mark, you may be able to employ somebody to actually help you with that marking process.
Oh, okay. So somebody to come in and give you an extra hand.
Absolutely, but that's not applicable for most people. It's only for certain occupations, but it is a possibility. And when you do, there are other issues which could trip you up. So watch out for those, i.e. don't pay them more than a certain rate. Obviously, a person is worth what you pay them, but if you cross a certain threshold, then you yourself have to become an employer.
So this is also about awareness. I like this because if I'm kind of a bit pushed, stressed out, and I've taken on an assignment that I can't really do myself, I might be inclined to bring in someone who I know can do to the standard that I can do it in. And I might be inclined to just pay them on the side from my own income and just take the hit. and not be bothered about. But what you're saying is, if I do that,
Yep.
I can actually claim what I'm paying them as a tax refund.
Absolutely. What you do is you claim the allowance, and to put it simply, what you should be taxed on is your salary less what you've spent.
And of course, that is an allowable expense, and of course they would have to declare that.
They would.
In whatever way that they
would. Yes, the person you employ would have to declare their own earnings. But you're not directly responsible for that, prima facie.
But you'd have to get some form of receipt from them to the effect that you have actually a transaction has occurred.
Yes, if you spend any money, as far as possible, get a receipt for everything.
Get a receipt for everything. Okay, time for another piece of music. And I'm not going to run the Taxman thing to death here this afternoon, but I was looking in our archives, and this is one that it's called Taxman. It was originally from the Beatles, but this one is a version. I think it's slightly more upbeat. It's with Vaughan, Stevie Ray, and Double Time. It's Taxman. Taxman, Vaughan, Stevie Ray, and Double Trouble. And you're listening to Marlow FM, the Biz Buzz program, and this afternoon's topic is about personal taxation and how we can get refunds going back five years. My guest this afternoon is Wisdom Da Costa. Wisdom, let's talk about some more general expenses that the ordinary employee might encounter in the course of their work that they could claim on.
Okay. If I tell you what the niche ones are, so these are sort of things that aren't applicable to most people, but you can if it's appropriate. So a blind employee's guide dog, assistance wages, potentially books.
That's the one we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Absolutely,
assistance
yes.
wages, yeah.
Car washing, if you're a chauffeur. Club subscriptions, that's a very unusual one, but it is a possibility. Those are probably the more esoteric ones. Some of the more generally applicable ones, I think we start with clothing. And do you wear a uniform, or do you have to wear clothes of a specific colour at work as specified by employee?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the first big one. So if you do wear a uniform at work, or you wear half a uniform, or even if you have to wear uniform colours, whether it's shoes, socks, or the actual garments themselves, there could even be protective clothing which you have to wear. Then you can actually claim two allowances. The first one is if you have to buy the goods themselves, then you can claim that.
So overalls, if I have to wear overalls for my work and they're not supplied by the company,
correct? Yep.
Then that's something I could claim on.
Absolutely. If you're a butcher or something like that, you have to wear those overalls to protect your clothing underneath, and whoever the butcher is that you work for doesn't provide them, then yes, you can make two claims. One is for the cost of buying that item of clothing, whether it's protective clothing, or whether it's a uniform, whether it's boots or anything like that. So first, the cost of buying it in the first place,
mm-hmm.
and secondly is the cost of cleaning and maintenance.
Of course.
And there's two aspects to that cost of cleaning. One is you can claim a general cost of cleaning, and you can either claim what you spend, or here's a really lovely one, is that you can actually claim a fixed allowance. So even if you spend £1 on the cost of cleaning your uniform, you can claim £60 at the very least. And if you work in a profession where your uniform gets very dirty, so you have to clean it separately, you have to clean it more often, then you can claim probably up to £140 a year, even if you only spend £1.
Even so, you can actually just claim for that, and the £60, which is provided that's offered by the government.
It's effectively a fixed rate allowance.
It's a fixed rate allowance.
Yep.
And how about tools?
Exactly the same for tools. You're right. If you're job involved,
I'm a butcher and
tools.
I bring my own knives in, or I'm a chef. I have to bring my own knives into the kitchen.
Yeah, and if you're a car mechanic, or any other role like that, or even if you're a tree surgeon, or if you're a job man where you have to go out and about, so you have to have your own screwdrivers or utility belt, then yes, you can claim for the tools you actually have to buy. There are two ways of claiming tools. In fact, there are three ways. One of them is to claim this fixed rate allowance. So there's a list of 250 professions where there are specific allowances that they can claim, almost guarantee that they can claim it. So you can claim that fixed rate expense.
Mm-hmm.
You can claim you can claim it as an individual item. So you may have a tool which lasts 2 or 3 years, but you could, if it's not too much, if it's not £10,000 or a big amount of money, then you could actually claim that as an annual expense. So you've spent that money, you claim the whole lot.
And do you have to get some form of confirmation from an employer that is the case, that you do wear a uniform, you do clean it yourself, you do provide your own tools?
It would be helpful if that was available, but some professions it's more obvious than others that's the case, and I'm sure that HMRC might take a pragmatic view in that case. But somewhere in your contract of employment, it probably is buried there, either in the contract of employment or the manual of employment. It probably is buried. So, for example, if you work for a certain supermarket and you have to wear a uniform, then even if it's not in the contract of employment, it is evident that is the normal method of working. And if it's the normal method of working and you can show that that's what everybody does, then you can claim that allowance.
So how about a suit, collar and tie suit shirt that I have to wear, or a particular dress, or whatever, that I have to wear something to work? Is it I can't get the word out. Particularly a uniform, or if I have a suit that I go to I'm a solicitor or an accountant.
I wish. It's not quite that. It's if you have to, if your contract of employment or the way in which you do your job, it specifies you must wear a particular uniform or particular range of clothing, then you can claim. But if you wear a suit just because it makes you look smart, then you can't. Or
if you need a smart suit to do your job, that's not
unlikely, because you don't necessarily need it. You could wear whatever you want, unless of course there is a specified dress code.
Okay, if like an IBM, they used to wear a blue shirt or something like that. So if the company has a particular image that they like, the white shirt,
if it's written in your contract, you can claim it.
If it's written in your contract that says you must wear black shoes and white shirt,
you can probably claim it.
You can probably claim it. Yeah.
Having said that, HMRC may start to and ah and try to actually stop you from claiming it. So you may get into a bit of a series of correspondence trying to explain why you have to claim it. But this is where I said the key principle: make sure you got your contract of employment, and make sure you've got a copy of that. Make sure it says what you can and can't do, or what you have to do, and get something from your employer if necessary, which instructs you to do something.
And I guess if you feel that you are expending, you're having an expenditure which isn't included in the contract and isn't being reimbursed, you could then, as we said earlier, go to your employer and say, look, I want to claim this back because I'm incurring this expense. It's costing me. Could you give me some letter of confirmation that this is the case?
That would be useful. Always, at every stage, I'm trying to make sure that people are successful in what they can do. You can make a claim, but the more evidence you have to back up that claim, the more chances of you actually being successful.
So there's a couple of useful points there. Are there any other allowances or expenses that you'd like to share with us?
There are many expenses. Clothing and tools are one of them. Another popular one is professional fees and subscriptions. Now, what that means is that there are a number of different organisations which you may need to be a member of. It could be that you're a member of a firm of accountants, or it could be that you're a member of the NUS, one of the unions. And generally speaking, if you're a member of a professional body, which is part of your work, related to your work, or a union, then HMRC will give you an allowance for that. They'll let you claim your annual subscription fee and set that against your tax.
So you pay union fees, you can claim that?
Generally speaking, but I have to say that if you read the article I've written called The Magnificent 5,000, there are some very strange bodies that you can claim a subscription for, and equally there are some very notable bodies you can't. There doesn't seem to be too much rhyme and reason, although I'm sure someone from HMRC will correct me on that.
And at the end of the program, we're going to get some details from you on websites, etc., where people can actually check some of this information out and look at your blogs and articles where all of that information will be available. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Just give us one or two more, because you're kind of lifting the lid off, for me anyway, of some things that I had taken for granted. I didn't realise that, I thought about memberships of certain things, because you, in my introduction, you're a member of the Association of Accountants and various other bodies, and I guess as an employee, if I was employed in an accountancy firm, they might actually pay for that for me.
Correct. Yep.
Is that a taxable benefit?
It is a taxable benefit.
That would appear on my P11D.
It should normally appear on your P11D, but the company may get what's called an exemption. They may apply for that from HMRC to simplify their own processes of producing P11Ds.
But the thing you were saying earlier is if the company is paying for it and they're putting it on a P11D, I would be paying tax on that amount.
Yes,
possibly.
you'll be paying tax and you should reclaim it.
And I could reclaim that.
Yeah.
There's a couple of really, even just those small things could be worth a couple of £100.
And over a period of 4 or 5 years, it could mount up.
Thousands of pounds. Yeah.
But some of the bigger ones are going to be things like working from home. If HMRC have slightly relaxed their rules on working from home, in addition to that, there is the money you spend on accommodation or on travelling. If you use your car for work, that's another great one where you can actually probably get a reasonable amount of money back. One of my clients in particular will get £2,000 or £3,000 a year cash back from HMRC because of the way he uses his car for work.
Describe just how would he be using it and so that he could get that amount of money back.
All right, you have to distinguish the amount of the mileage you do, the number of miles you drive, whether it's in a car or in a van or on a motorbike or even a bicycle. If you're doing stuff for work, you split into 2 categories. One category you can never claim, that's commuting. So your normal journey from where you are at home to work. If you do that journey day in, day out, repeatedly, you can't claim that. But anything else thereafter, you can claim. So if you have to go and take the bankings down to the bank, or you have to go and pick up a client, or you have to pop in to do a delivery, you can claim all of those miles. If you have to go and meet somebody,
meet somebody at the airport or pick somebody up from the station.
Absolutely, you can claim those miles, and you claim them in one particular way. You're not allowed to claim the petrol, but you add up the number of miles, and then you multiply it by 45 pence.
That's the given amount of money per mile, is it?
That's the amount of money, 45 pence per mile for the first 10,000 miles. It's called mileage allowance relief. You can claim that. Now, that's if your employer's not paying it to you. So you have 2 options there. Either your employer pays you 45p or more, in which case you can't claim any more.
So you put in your mileage to your employer.
Yes.
On an expenses form.
But if your employer doesn't pay you back any mileage, or if he pays you back less than 45 pence per mile, then you can claim for the difference.
And it still comes down to that will be on your P11D.
If it's on your
that story again.
Yes, if it's on your P11D, then you claim the maximum 45 pence. So, for example, your employer may have paid you 20 pence a mile, and you drove 1,000 miles, so that's £200. And that item, if it's on your P11D, then you claim that 20 pence, or £200, plus the other 25 pence.
So the idea would be that whatever amount is on your P11D, you could claim back.
Unless it's something that you haven't spent money on, for example, medical insurance. Sometimes your employer will pay for that directly. And if that's on your P11D, you didn't pay for that, so you can't claim that back.
So it's only whatever you've paid for that you've claimed that's on your P11D?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And just one small nuance there. So 45 pence per mile applies for the first 10,000 miles for a car or a van. Thereafter, for a car or van, it's 25 pence a mile. And there are slightly different rates for for motorcycles and bicycles.
Time for some more music, but before I do that, I have a question. I've heard it said that we work till a particular time during the year. So for the first until May or something like that, we're working for the taxman, and thereafter we're working for ourselves. So for the first couple of months of the year, whatever we earn technically goes to the taxman. Is that an urban myth?
I think it's an urban myth. I think it's we love to hate the tax man, perhaps justifiably, perhaps not. But effectively, the way they PAYE is structured, that they give you an allowance every month. When I say an allowance, they'll give you a personal allowance. They won't give you allowance for your expenses unless you claim them.
Yes. So I guess it also depends on the amount of money you earn and the amount of tax that you have to pay.
If, for example, you work for 6 months of the year, so that takes you up till September of the 6 months of a tax year, and then you're unfortunate enough to then lose your job or stop working, and you don't work for the next 6 months, then you've still got 6 months worth of personal allowances, which you can use. So you've overpaid tax at that point. So come the end of the year, HMRC should normally themselves come back to you and say, we've collected too much tax, here's a check back. But that's only in those circumstances in relation to if you stop work before the end of the tax year. HMRC will never come back and say, here's a check for the expenses you didn't tell us you didn't claim.
I wish. Let's listen to Money, Money, Money by ABBA. Money, Money, Money by ABBA, ABBA Gold. It's a rich man's world. If I only had some money. And the purpose and intention of our conversation this afternoon is about making sure that we hold on to the money that we do have legally by making sure that we claim all the expenses and the that we can from the taxman on the allowances that we have as individuals. It's not about corporations, corporation tax, or small business owners. This is about individuals, the 30 million individuals who are working in the country and who are paying, whose tax is being deducted at source in their companies, but who actually have a personal opportunity to reclaim, seems to me, lots of money from the taxman legally. And that's what we're talking about this afternoon with my guest, Wisdom Da Costa. Wisdom, we were talking there during that the break about work. So if you're an employee but you're working from home,
yes,
just tell us about some of the allowances that we can, so the refunds we can get for that.
Okay, if I set the scene that more and more people obviously work from home with flexible working, hot desking, whatever they call it nowadays, and the internet, more people have to work from home. So here's a really, really important thing. If you have to work from home and your contract says you must, it is a requirement rather than an opportunity, then you can claim allowances. So if you work at home because you just feel like it, and your employer has given you the opportunity to work from an office, then you can't claim any allowances. So here's a little tax tip then. Make sure that if you do work from home, that you get an instruction either that you must work from home in your contract of employment, or that you have some sort of a letter from your employer saying he's requiring you to work from home.
Is that not a standard? Would that not be standard practice? HR companies or the HR department including that in the contract or not?
It depends. I can't speak for HR departments and the HR departments of companies, but quite often things grow over a period of time, and it may or may not be included in your contract of employment that you have to work from home.
So because working from home has become such a normal thing now for many people.
Yes.
Over recent years.
Yeah, so make sure it's in your contract of employment, or that your employer gives you an instruction in writing or by email that you are required to work from home on this day or that day, or generally on 2 or 3 days a week.
And what can you claim?
Great. And what can you claim? Well, for employees, and this is different for solopreneurs and self-employed, then what you can claim is limited. So you can only claim the additional costs you've had to pay because you're working from home. So, for example, you can claim a proportion of gas, electricity, heating costs and water. You can, under certain circumstances, even claim broadband. But the sort of things you can't claim for are council tax, rent rates, water rates, mortgage interest payments, endowment premiums and insurance. So this, if you like, the structural cost of operating your house, you can't claim if you're an employee.
If you're using a room as an office?
When you say a room as an office, you mean in your own house? Or
yes, in your own house.
Okay.
You've set aside a room to be able to work from home because you've got the children and you need some privacy.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got a room specifically dedicated for work, then actually I would advise people not to do that, because you get caught by capital gains tax regulations and business rates. So what I would advise is that if you have to work from home, then what you should do is work from an area which can have multiple uses. You can use it for your personal things at some stage. Kitchen table, for example. Use that to eat your dinner from, prepare things from, but also you might be able to work from there.
So I'm going to ask you to backtrack there. And so if somebody has designated a room, a small cubbyhole or a room in the house, there's capital gains tax? Just explain that to me just a little bit.
Yeah, if you're using a specific area of your home just for business purposes and not for general domestic issues, so you don't live in it, you don't have a study there, you just use it for work, and other than that, everyone else is locked out. There is a risk that if you're claiming allowances on that situation, that that proportion of your house is not your personal private residence. And because that proportion of your house is not your personal private residence, you may have to pay capital gains tax on that proportion
when you sell the house. Or should you sell the house?
Exactly.
That's what I thought. I wanted to get clear on that.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, continue on where we were.
Yeah, so we sort of said what you can claim as an employee. So that would include gas, electricity, heating costs, water, broadband, obviously some sort of
Mobile phone.
Mobile phone you can always claim. If it's for work purposes, you can always claim. There's no
So how do you
restriction on
how
that.
do you separate? It's like the car. How do you separate calls that I'm making for business and personal calls?
Well, if it's a mobile phone, you can claim the entire amount. If you want to separate, and you have to separate for things like gas, electricity and heating costs, then there is a rule of thumb. You basically do a little calculation and you work out what proportion of that is work-related. In the situation where we're talking about telephone calls, where it's simple, you can go through your itemised bill and highlight the things that if it's a landline, highlight on your bill what relates to business. However, if it's for the general costs, like heat and light, then what you do is take a fraction, a proportion. So it's really going to be looking at the amount of time you spend compared to the amount of time in the year, and the surface area, if you like, the area of the house. So, for example, if you've got four usable rooms in your house, which you could use to work from, then you can claim, and you can only ever work in one room at a time, you can claim 1/4 of the costs. But then you have to reduce it by saying, well, actually, how many hours did I actually spend overall in the year?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So
I keep a track of that.
well, yes, more or less. I'm sure you can use a broad brush rule of thumb, saying on average I spend 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So then you reduce that 1/4 if you work from one out of the 4 rooms by that proportion. So number of hours divided by the number of hours in the year. That's one way. There is a simpler way.
Yes, thank you.
Simpler way.
My eyes were glazing over there.
Absolutely, yeah. You can get a spreadsheet actually on our website to download and do that calculation. The simpler way is to say you claim £4 per week. Nice and simple.
Nice. And so anybody who's working from home, who's required to do so by their employer, could claim that anyway.
Yes, up to £4 a week. If they're working 5 days a week from home and 52 weeks a year, then you claim £4 times by 52, £208.
If they're working 3 days, it's times 3 or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's in addition to, is that the total amount, or is that in addition to other things they can claim?
That's the only amount you can claim with regard to your use of home. Broadband is a slightly different category.
Yeah, and telephone and mobile phones we cover. So if you were working from home 5 days a week, you'd have £4 a day times the number of weeks.
Yep.
So that's already a couple of £100.
It is, yes.
As potential refund there.
For each year, and you can go back
for each year.
4 or 5 years.
Thank you. So is that the last major one of the expenses that we can claim allowances on?
I think those would probably be there are 21 or so plus allowances you can claim or circumstances you can claim for. But I think those are the ones that cover most people.
And I will mention that it's again that you've written a book on this, how to get a tax refund and pay less tax in future, which we're going to give some details on about at the end of the program, and also names of the information about your website. And we're coming up to the news now, but in the few minutes that we've got left, I just wanted to ask about the capital allowances. What's that? What's that exactly? A capital allowance?
Okay. A car, for example, not that you can necessarily claim a car, but a car would be a big piece of equipment that you would use over a number of years. A computer is something else that you use over a number of years, and typically wouldn't be more than £5-10. It would be £1,000 or sometimes more if you're lucky enough to own a MacBook Pro or something like that. Sorry for the advertising.
And there are other computers.
Of course there are. Yes. So when you have to buy things like that, which will last more than 1 year, 2, 3, maybe 4 years, then you obviously, and they are work related, then you can claim an allowance for that. Now, you can either claim that in the year that you bought it, if it's only a small amount. For example, a stapler, I know it sounds a bit trivial, but a stapler would last 2-3 years, depending on your household, of course. And you'd normally claim that over the period of 2 or 3 or 4 years. So that would normally you claim a capital allowance. But because it's so small, HMRC will say, yeah, whatever, you claim it in the year, it's not a problem. So looking at the bigger items, so for example, desks, chairs, cupboards, printers, computers, those tools if you're a mechanic, and knives if you're a cook, those sorts of things you spend a lot more money on, then you can claim what's called a capital allowance. The way you do it is you can claim it either using a thing called an annual investment allowance. Capital allowance is complicated. I'm sorry about this, but it's just the way it is. So you take your money. So just suppose you spent £10,000 in that year on equipment. So you have two options. Either you claim the whole lot in that year because it qualifies under this category called annual investment allowance. So you claim £10,000 in the year, or if you want to, you can claim that over 3 or 4 years.
We're going to come back to that after the news. Slip Sliding Away by Paul Simon. Welcome back to the Biz Buzz program. I'm here with my guest, Wisdom Da Costa. And before we move on, I just wanted to make a couple of mentions. We've got the Marlow FM radio run that's coming up on the 1st of June in Higginson Park. That's a great run, and we're always well supported, and we're also looking for sponsors for this run. It starts somewhere at 9 o'clock in the morning, and there's a great, if you want to go onto our website, that's Marlow FM, marlowfm.co.uk, and all the information is there. The other thing I wanted to mention was Odyssey, the musical at Northern Farm. One of our co-presenters, Sue Turner, has mentioned she's been there, and it's absolutely fantastic. She says it started yesterday, Wednesday, and it runs through until Saturday, and there's even a matinee on Saturday afternoon, and it starts at 7:30. Again, if you want to look on the Northern Farm website, you'll get all the information there. It's also on our website, the Marlow FM website too. So coming, and also if you wanted to ask Wisdom, my guest, a question about your own personal tax, you can email us in on studio@marlowfm.co.uk, and if you wanted to text us, it would be 07900 975 975. That's 07900 975 975. So Wisdom, thank you. We're coming back to this taxation, and I'm really, my head is spinning with the number of different opportunities. It's almost like a no-brainer if we could sit down and just take the time to gather up this information and to use it. You were talking about the capital gains tax. Was it capital allowance?
Capital allowances.
And you said that's a fairly meaty subject. So that, I guess you explain more about that in your book.
Yeah, in the book we do discuss capital allowances. I did what you just did just now. Yeah, capital allowances at length. And the reason is it's complicated, but also there are great opportunities to use capital allowances wisely to reduce your tax bill over a period of 2 or 3 years. So I say capital allowances. I use the word allowances rather than expenses. And it's the same with mileage allowance relief and fixed rate allowances, fixed rate expenses. There are a few categories of, if I can digress, there are a few categories of things you spend money on which you can't claim directly on your tax return or on the letter you send to HMRC, but you have to claim these things called allowances, which are a specific category of things that you can do. So back to capital allowances. So with capital allowances, to put it very, very simply, you can either claim, there are two or three allowances you can claim, but the biggest ones you can claim are either the thing called the annual investment allowance, which allows you to claim the whole lot that you spend up to £250,000 or £500,000 as George Osborne has just increased it by. So you can claim that whole lot in 1 year, or you can claim it gradually over a period of 5, 6, 7 years, or using a thing called a writing down allowance. Mm-hmm. Now you may ask, well, why on earth wouldn't I claim it all in 1 year? It's a no-brainer,
I was just going to ask you that question.
Well, the reason is sometimes you may want to delay when you claim it. So you may not want to claim it this year because you know that next year your tax rate could be higher.
Might have a bonus coming in or something like that.
Correct. You could be going up from 20% to 40%, and obviously it's going to make more sense. It will give you more benefit if you claim it when the tax rate is higher. But there are little other rules which, as you rightly say, the book will explain how to get around those, how to make the best of it, and how to just think it through. How is this on a bigger picture affecting me? So not just a knee-jerk, I must have this now sort of thing, but delaying that gratification, if I might use a phrase, and working out what's best over a longer period of time.
Thank you. And in the book, you also mentioned that there are 4 industry and job-specific allowances. So what are they?
No, actually, that's chapter 4.
Oh, that's chapter 4.
Absolutely. There aren't 4. There are 250 industries who can claim
I have to read the book again.
allowances, yeah. So, yeah, this is primarily going back to the if you have to use protective clothing or
that.
uniforms or tools for your work. And HMRC have set out a list of 250 different roles and jobs in different industries. And if you qualify, if you can say, yeah, that's me, my job description says so, or the way I work says that's what I am, then you can claim a specific allowance. And that allowance could be £60, it could be £80, £100, £140. I think some paramedics can probably claim a higher amount. And it's sort of related, I presume, it's related to what HMRC think you're spending on cleaning your equipment or cleaning your uniform. So, for example, I have one client who actually is a tree surgeon. Now, his protective clothing, it gets very, very dirty. Well, actually, he's a gardener. So, especially in summer, it's not just your average, it gets dirty, but the amount of muck that it attributes to his, or attracts to his clothing is enormous. So he has to wash it separately. He has to wash it multiple times, 2 or 3 times a week. And because it's washed separately, he has claimed not just the £60 allowance, but the £100 or £120 allowance. So the book sort of does, or the website, you can look at either, will give you those allowances.
Okay, so you've given us some great thought-provoking insights into what we can claim. How do we go about doing it?
Okay, so far what we've said is that you've looked at your contract, you've worked out what your role says you have to spend money on, you've kept a record of all the expenses, things you've spent money on, or the mileage you've travelled, and so you've got a value. You've got a value which you want to claim. Now, there are actually 4 ways of making a claim. I'll end with the best way. So one way is if you're forced to make a self-assessment tax return, claim it on your self-assessment tax return. Don't volunteer for a self-assessment tax return because it's a lot of pain. Every year, you'll have to fill in the forms, you have to get it in on time. If not, you pay a £100 fine plus penalties for a late payment. So one way
is this in addition to what my employer might complete for me?
Yes.
Self-assessment tax.
Typically, some people have to. Yeah, your employer will send in a P60.
Yes.
Or his version of the P60. But for some people, HMRC will say, well, actually, you know what? You've got other forms of income. You don't just have employment income. You've got perhaps a rental property. You've got a little sideline, a small business. And you have dividends or big amounts of loan interest, i.e. receiving loan interest. So we want you to show that, or even a pension, and we want you to show that on a specific self-assessment tax return, where we can pull all that information together and see it all as a big picture. So it is painful. Don't volunteer for it. But if HMRC say you must, then that's where you can claim these amounts.
But if you have those additional sources of income, how else are you going to declare them?
It would be on the self-assessment tax return,
right?
But specifically, if no employee is just, you're very valuable. But if you are an employee with no other source of income, then there are 3 further ways of actually making a claim. One is by telephone. You can actually pick up the telephone and talk through one of the HMRC advisors. Usually, they're very helpful, and they should be able to walk you through the process. But you mustn't forget that they're not going to necessarily know your situation or act in your interest, but they'll react to the information you give them. So telephone is an idea. I don't really advise that in case they use big language or jargon which you just glaze over and you don't know what it means. So telephone's one. Another one is a Form P87, which you can download from HMRC's website. It's a more structured way of noting the information and your key details and sending that information in. Now that's one way, but I always find that the best way is just to write a letter. There are key bits of information you need to note on that letter. For example, you have to note your name, national insurance number, your address. You have to make a claim, state, I want to make a claim for A, B and C under certain tax legislation. And then you set out the things you want to make a claim for. You list them. Whether it's an expense, whether it's an allowance, a mileage allowance, whether it's a capital allowance. Maybe you want to claim your payments you made under gift aid, or even you maybe make payments to pension funds or for your own pension outside of your employer's schemes.
So I read in your book that you have these letters. Could we use one of those letters, or Does it come in a letter form, or is it a form into which you put amounts in particular boxes relating to particular categories?
Yeah, in the book I've got a series of letters. There are some template letters, i.e. blank letters, which have got the key bits of information. For example, I want to make a claim under the Texas TMB Act of whatever year. It gives you the address of where to write to. It prompts you to where to put your personal information, and it gives you space to add in the items you specifically want to claim. So there are either templates, there are also worked examples saying, well, if you incurred A, B, and C costs, this is what the letter would look like. And if you buy the book, actually, I'm sorry to plug the book, but in the book there is a specific web address which has got dedicated resources. So you can get general stuff on the website, but there's a secrets part of the website which is available only to people who buy the book. And there you can download the forms yourself for free.
And so I've completed this. I've made a list of all my allowances, sent off. So prepared the letter. So there's a list in a separate document with the letter is attached to that. Is that? I'm being a bit simple here. No,
you can take either approach, whatever you feel more comfortable with. You can either write a letter, which is just a general covering letter saying, "This I want to claim a whole bunch of stuff. See the attached list." Mm-hmm. You can do that, or you can actually do a 2-page letter and include all the stuff in all the things you want to claim for. List them in one letter, be it over 2 or 3 pages.
Lovely, Whitney Houston, and that was a dedication for your wife Carol. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've got 4 children. You and Carol?
We have 5 children between us. Carol has 3, Wayne, Natalie and Mark. Hello, guys. And of course I've got my 2 lovely boys, Daniel and Jonathan.
Yeah, and you're also a teacher, so you teach young teenagers. Tell us something about that before we finalise complete the programme.
I taught for 5 years. I taught at my old school, which was Slough Grammar School, obviously in Slough, although I think they may have renamed themselves. And yeah, it was a great time, exciting time, but also a very stressful time. I will never have anyone say anything bad about teachers ever again. It's a brutal profession, but the upside is those light bulb moments when you see the child suddenly gets it.
And what were you teaching?
Teaching science, so mainly biology and chemistry.
From your biochemical
exactly.
background.
Yes.
Was that an interesting transition from biochemistry to accountancy? Was there a natural transition there?
Well, I suppose it's just life happens, doesn't it? And for me, I was doing a little bit of cloning at the time in genetics, and that's what I wanted to do my research in. But that was a number of years ago, and the cloning wasn't a mainstream thing. It was a very niche thing, so I couldn't get a PhD place. So I just thought, well, let's do what comes next, which would be accountancy, which would, I suppose the idea was it gave you a pathway to something different. So it was an open-ended channel. Which is why I chose that.
I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm and your passion for what you do, and the fact that what you're doing is helpful to people. I mean, people are working hard, and it's not easy out there, and the money that we're earning can so easily slip away. And here's where we're actually potentially allowing it to slip away by not actually claiming, by not knowing what to claim for and how to claim it, and then actually taking the action. Yeah,
I think if you go through this process, obviously I would say buy the book, but then you sort of become a little bit more tax savvy, and once you've done it once, then you know what to do in the future. So this first time you work through the process, it should be a massive gain, and then in future you just know that how to check things to make sure that the tax is right, and usually that means a lower level of tax.
Well, you certainly, in my view, you certainly know your stuff, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to give our listeners some information as to a number of things, how they can buy the book, the website, and how they can get in contact with you if they want some more information on this. So just give us some information about those things. Okay.
The best way to contact me and the best way to find out more is going to the website. The website is www.accountingwisdom.com. So on that site you will find a lot of articles which will help unpack some of the items in the book. So the book is self-contained, so if you buy that you need nothing else. But if you want to know more, if you want to see how things work and how practically, then you can go to the website, read the articles. There's some interesting things there, potentially controversial as well. For example, do the rich pay more tax, as David Cameron said they would? Well, read the article and find out. You can probably guess what the answer is already. Also, if you buy the book, the best place to buy the book is from Amazon. I say the best place because, clearly I want to push books, local bookshops like Waterstones and Smiths and stuff like that. But practically, if you want quick delivery and if you want to also get a free Kindle version, for example, if you buy the book, the hard copy, you can get the Kindle version of the book either free, every now and then we give it away free, or at a very low cost, £1 or £2.
And so the name of the book is How to Get a Tax Refund and Pay Less Tax in Future. So how to get a tax refund I love that Wisdom. Was it Wisdom Accounting?
It was Accounting Wisdom.
Accounting Wisdom.
Yeah.
I just think that's a fantastic title for a website. Accountingwisdom.com. And so it's Wisdom, WISDOMDA COSTA.
Correct.
Wisdom Da Costa.
That's my full name, yes.
That's your full name.
But the Accounting Wisdom is obviously ACCOUNTING WISDOM.
So give us a website again.
www.accountingwisdom.com.
So I want to thank you very much for being my guest this afternoon. I really found it engaging for myself, very informative and enjoyable. You bring the subject of taxation and personal tax alive, Wisdom, and I love that name, Wisdom. You bring it alive and you really personalize it, and I can see that the work that you've put in, the experience that you've had, you bring that all together into the conversation, and I appreciate it and look forward to having you back on the program at some time in the future.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I really do look forward to coming back and giving your listeners more tax tips.
And thank you all for listening. This is Dermot Fitzpatrick saying goodbye for now. Look forward to being back with you Thursday in 2 weeks' time with another program from Biz Buzz, and I leave you with Lou Reed's Perfect Day.